Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Liza Picao with the U.S. Forest Service International Programs and one of the co-producers of Where Women Choose to Walk, Paths to Improving Cities and Nature, together with Dr. Adrina from, from Toronto, Canada. And I want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to so many of you from around the world. And we are really happy to present to you the fifth episode of this series. The topic today is women in urban research. So before we begin, I just first want to thank you for joining us and for seeing the link at the last minute, this new link. This is a safe space, which means that even though we are recording this session and you want to remain anonymous but still be part of the discussion, please feel free to keep your video camera off and change your name if you have to. You can type in your comments in the chat, and this is a non-judgmental space, so please feel free to write your thoughts down or to voice them aloud during the discussion session. Please mute your microphones though during the panel discussion, and we will be monitoring the chat as well and putting links in there as we go along. So as I mentioned, we are joined by so many different people from around the world today. The dots on this page the green dots represent all those who have joined us from the various countries around the world in past episodes. The yellow dots represent those that are new to today's session, and our figurines in black represent our invited guests for today and where they're from. In the registration, we also asked you what topics you've done your research on. And so this is an initial word cloud from those topics. Wildlife, urban forestry is a large one, resilience, climate change, soils, mental health. These are all the different topics that all of you have been working on, or those who have submitted in the registration. So as I mentioned, today Adrina and I are welcoming Dr. Erica Svensson from the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station, Maria Arroyave from Colombia, Dr. Nguyen Han Quinn from Vietnam, and Dr. Patricia Vega from Peru. And we'll hear more about their stories in a little bit. But before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about me. I've been with the U.S. Forest Service now for 22 years. I started out as an intern, and now I'm in the Urban Outreach and Partnerships unit. I also help run the Beyond Trees network, and I help co-produce this series. Did I always want to be here? No. When I was younger, so on the left side is a picture of my mom, myself, that's me in the middle, and my younger brother. And this is a picture of us at Princeton University. We lived there for a couple of years while my father was doing his postdoctoral work in economics. And so I was always surrounded at home by like-minded or my father's like-minded peers and friends. And the topics that they would discuss were always about macroeconomics, microeconomics, theories, etc. And the women that were there were so brilliant, all of them with these doctors as titles. And I realized, oh, I kind of want to have that title too, but I also wanted to be an actual doctor. And then as I grew up, I just pursued the sciences. I went to a science high school. And then after that, when I went into college, I pursued physics, and I really loved the sciences, but I had this image of research as someone with gray hair, a lab coat, and just stayed inside a research room for a long time. And I had a little bit of an inkling of that because I did one summer just in a room without a window studying planaria. And I realized I can't do this. This is not something that I want to do. I want to be like Einstein but on that beam of light that he wrote and inspired, I want to be out there in the world doing good. So I didn't pursue it. I don't have a PhD. I don't have a master's. And I realized late in life that the women who have the PhDs, who have the monikers, who are in research, are some of the most amazing, innovative, pioneering women. And many of them I met only 4 or 5 years ago. One of them is here. That's Dr. Erica Svensson and her crew at the New York City Urban Field Station. So I want to hear today, the reason we're all here is for me, I want to hear about their journeys. What inspired them, not just as women, but of women in various different cities to pursue research? And I think we're going to start with Adrina from Tree Canada, from Toronto, Canada. Adrina, please.
Thanks so much, Liza. Yeah, it's just welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. As we began discussing this topic, when we were thinking through the year and the topics that we wanted to address in our series, this Women in Urban Research, we spoke about how women actually have been part of science origins and explorations. And as Erica had said in one of our preliminary discussions, the telling of the stories and the results of that, like it's been male dominated because those have been the stories that have been told throughout history. And so it's not that women haven't been part of research or part of science throughout history, but that the stories have been told by men. And so the shaping of the institutions in which we work are now male dominated, but we're seeing this change as we kind of move through our work. And unfortunately, there are still many groups who are unheard, unseen, and feel undervalued in their work. And part of the reason that Liza and I started this series is because we wanted to share these stories worldwide and learn from one another's experiences and perspectives. And so the three questions that I think arose during our discussions were: who's telling the story now? How is it being told? And to whom are the stories directed? So today we've asked everyone, I think Liza mentioned, to share their journeys into research, their personal inspirations and research applications and community engagement, and then the current focus of their work. And next slide. Sorry, and this is a photo of all the women that have inspired me. I think in the last 10 years for very different reasons. Women in research, women in practice, and it's just been such an honor to be engaged in a lot of these events and activities and projects. Next slide, please, Liza. So I'd like to start this conversation by sharing why I pursued this career in research as well as practice, because I don't work for an academic institution. I work for a national NGO called Tree Canada. I've been with Tree Canada since 2004, and more full time since 2014. I'm the director of engagement and research, and the work that we do is spans the country. We plant trees, and the work that I get to do in my unit is really build relationships with national and international partners for various projects. But essentially, for me, I believe that people need to get uncomfortable to affect meaningful change. And through the work that I do in building relationships, I help people kind of get out of their comfort zones to help solve urban environmental problems in a lot of different scales, whether it's local, regional, or national. And I guess I can say stories define us and our experiences and how we connect with one another. And I think, when I self-identify, I wear a lot of hats and I identify in a lot of different ways. I'm a woman, I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a friend, but I'm also professionally a researcher, a practitioner, an educator, and these are sort of all the different hats and ways I identify. And so when I try to connect with other people, I try to think about that. I try to think about how others identify themselves. And of course, this can change depending on where you are, where you work, the time of day, the time of year, where you are in your life. And I think as we think about communicating and bridging research and practice and community, I think that's one of the things that I try to bring to my work, is keeping that top of mind and being intentional about the way we share those stories to whom we're sharing those stories and for what purpose. Next slide, please, Liza. So my journey, I have a very eclectic background. Unlike Liza, I did not go into science. I actually hadn't been in applied science since early high school. I was in the arts for most of my high school as well as my first degree. I was in painting, poetry. I was in theater. I worked in film for a number of years, and I loved it. This was sort of my life and my passion, and I wanted to be in the arts forever. And I moved to Montreal and I did a bachelor's in creative writing and anthropology. And this is where having this anthropology angle, I started seeing a lot of the social aspects of of society and just learning about how people lived and worked and it changed the way I thought and definitely gave me kind of food for stories and poetry that I was working on at the time and the compilations. um, and so I had this great passion at the time for parrot conservation, and so I'm excited that Patricia's on our panel. Want to pick your brain later about Peru, and so I was just really passionate about large parrot conservation in southeastern Peru, and it inspired a novella that I wrote called Grounded, and this is the cover that I drew for that picture here, and uh, and so that made me think about their habitats and sustainable habitats and forestry and so my introduction to kind of forestry in general was really through my desire to help birds and my love for birds and ornithology and but I didn't have science, so this was just I didn't think that this was ever going to be an option. And like Liza, I had that stereotype of lab coats and labs and I don't know, beakers and just being in a lab, and I thought this is just not something I could see myself going into. Didn't have the applied science aspects, and that of course changed as I met a lot of different people. When I moved back to Toronto after my undergrad and working in sort of publishing and theater, I pursued horticulture at Humber College, and then a teaching certificate where I ended up teaching ESL at a foreign language school, and again sort of had this ability to think about education and curriculum development and how we can communicate various stories to wide audiences. And it's here where I really learned kind of about learning outcomes in general and developing lesson plans, etc. And so now I try to bring all that, the education background, the arts background, and the sort of multimedia communication background into some of my academic and applied work in urban forestry. Next slide, please, Liza. And so my introduction to urban forestry started during my master's, and I was volunteering for Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society in Toronto in the early 2000s, and I met someone there that was at the Faculty of Forestry at the University of Toronto, and he said to me, "Yeah, you should try this Master of Forest Conservation program." And I thought, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. Didn't think I'd get in. Applied anyway, and they were looking for interdisciplinary backgrounds, and so I got in, and it really changed my life. This was the beginning for me for forestry, for thinking about forest policy, again, habitat conservation, sort of greenways, shade um, objectives. I mean, it just opened up my mind in traditional or commercial forestry, but as well as urban forestry. And so for my capstone paper for the MFC, I developed a tree inventory management plan for the Toronto District School Board, and I learned here about how to have conversations about prioritizing some needs over others, how to develop goals in this really new field. The learning curve was incredibly steep, but I learned how to do GIS and mapping, and I loved it. I thought this was so great, and it fueled a lot of my creative writing as well throughout those early years. And then from there, it kind of my journey's really been about degree and then working for a while, then going back and doing graduate work and then working for a while, because I really felt that working as a practitioner in the field informed a lot of the inquiries I wanted to make through my graduate work. And so After my master's degree, I worked in urban forest management planning with a consulting firm and helped develop management plans, and again learned about kind of interdisciplinary teams and prioritizing um, goals and looking at sort of public consultation. And it was very interesting, and again a very steep learning curve. I taught throughout that time and did a lot of volunteer service for a number of different groups, including CPAWS, as I mentioned before, the World Parrot Trust, the Ontario Urban Forest Council, and the Toronto Cancer Prevention Coalition. And this group, I'm still part of the Toronto Cancer Prevention Coalition, and we've worked for the last 15 years together. And it was a way for me to bring my research and knowledge in urban forestry to help develop a shade policy for the City of Toronto. And I also was really grateful for the opportunity to work with this incredible interdisciplinary board. We had medical doctors like dermatologists, we had urban foresters, and it was interdisciplinary as well as interdepartmental with respect to the City of Toronto. But it was a way for us to show how all these different minds could come together through their research and apply the work to something very practical and needed for the city at the time, which was the shade policy. It took us 12 years, but we were able to get the Board of Health to pass it. And now any development in the City of Toronto has to account for a percentage of shade, whether it's natural, built, or mobile shade. Um, we produced a film to showcase this journey, and we've had other communities from across the country connect with the chair to see if they can do the same. It was the first of its kind in Canada, and as far as I know, there are a couple of communities that are trying to follow in those footsteps and create their own shade policies in their city. So that's just sort of one example of how I've had the opportunity to bridge research in urban forestry with something very applied for the community. Next slide, please, Liza. Thank you. And so this really, I guess, fast forwarding to 2015, my work in urban forestry and my applied practice with all these various groups helped me to to sort of see this disparity in the way work was being done, the way people were being treated. And particularly for field arborists. And this was a sore point for me. And so I pursued a PhD at York University, and it really helped me ground some of these ideas in language that I didn't know I needed in order to showcase some of these perspectives that I was seeing. And again, the learning curve was very steep for me to kind of bridge and bring in these critical social theory into the work and the practice that I was seeing, because I had been up to that point very applied. And so that for me was another learning curve. And I essentially used that time to showcase underrepresented narratives in urban forestry from climber perspectives in Southern Ontario. And there were a number of outputs to that work, including, again, another short film, an international conference that focused on political ecology perspectives of urban forests, a multimodal process model for social integration, and then we had a text that also came out of the conference that focused on different perspectives of political ecology and urban forestry around the world. So it was exciting to kind of see this, uh, the practice and kind of just these inquiries, and then see where it went. I mean, it was all this to say that none of this was planned, and it still isn't. I mean, I kind of like this. Let's just see where it's going to go and grow, and the people that you meet along the way just inspire you every day. And from here, I one of the stories that came out of my PhD work was women's experiences, and some of the challenges that they were facing in a traditionally male dominated field, or both, so urban forestry as well as arboriculture, specifically as the kind of frontline workers in urban forestry. And so since 2018, next slide please, Liza. Thank you. So since 2018, this has really been the focus of my academic research. My postdoctoral work through UBC examined women's roles and leadership in this area. And again, there was a number of outcomes that came out of this work, including another film, short film, and then a number of conversations that we engaged with women over a couple of years at different panels at different conferences. One of them was our joint effort with the U.S. Forest Service at the World Forum on Urban Forestry, where it was the first time for me that we really looked at this international perspective, because my work focused on the US and Canada. We had responses from over 500 women talking about their experiences, positive, negative, looking at solutions for systemic interventions. And so at the World Forum on Urban Forestry, we had a panel of international women talk about their experiences, and it was so different. It was so different um, to see how the challenges that women face in the same field, but in different countries based on location, climate, culture, circumstance, and it was just incredible. And so from there, this is one of the reasons Liza and I wanted to start this discussion forum, is to kind of carry that idea from the World Forum on Urban Forestry forward and continue these discussions with women around the world. And we've had a lot of success and sort of positive feedback and input in the topics and the questions that everyone wants to discuss. So it's been a gift, really. and and yeah, I mean, from there, I mean, as like Liza, I have this is something that's a passion project for us, but my work with Tree Canada on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please, Liza. As I mentioned, I direct the engagement and research unit, and my research through Tree Canada, we collaborate on a number of different projects with industry, academic, as well as government partners. And the themes of my research have shifted a little under this, wearing this hat, and we've looked at Indigenous community engagement in urban greening projects across Canada, urban forests and public health, urban forest and multiculturalism across the world, and then examining municipal research needs across Canada. And those are just sort of some examples. But we also have a large engagement component to the work that we do. And so I guess all this, I mean, that's sort of me in a nutshell and how I got here. But all this to say that it's none of this was planned. Starting from my desire back doing my BA in creative writing, my intention was to go to the National Theatre School of Canada and be a playwright. That was the dream back in I think 1992, and so fast forward and here we are, and I've loved every minute, and I've been inspired by so many men and women along the way, and a lot of them are here today. So it's exciting to see. So I guess all that, moving forward, what we'd like to do is, and I think the next slide, Liza, is our questions. Yes. So what we'd like to do today, as we go through the other panelists and think about their journeys and think about some of the topics we're going to discuss, we have 4 guiding questions for the discussion, and we'd like all of you to maybe think about that as our panelists are speaking, and then we'll have a chance to discuss these after. We might not get to all of them, and that's fine. We do have platforms to continue the conversations online, which we'll share the links after. But our questions are, number 1, from a gender or cultural lens, how has your work been received? And do you feel that you've been stigmatized as a result of the work that you've been doing for whatever reason? The second is, when do you use the title of doctor or PhD? When is it appropriate? When is it not? What advice would you give younger women who want to pursue research or an academic career? And finally, where do you see the future of research in urban natural resource management heading? What are some of the challenges that we need to overcome to advance the field? And so these are some of the areas that we'd like to discuss with our panelists. And I think with that, what I'd like to do is is introduce Dr. Erica Svensson, or invite you, Erica, to now share your story. You've been such an inspiration to me since I met you all like 5 years ago, and I'm just really excited that you're here and that you're willing to share your time with us. So, Erica.
Thank you, Adrina and Liza and everyone joining today. It really is an honor to be here. And long live the parrots and all the other things that inspire us to do good, I will say. I'm Erica Svensson. I'm with the United States Forest Service, Northern Research Station. I'm a research social scientist working in cities and urbanizing areas, and really anywhere where there are humans. Identify mainly as a social ecologist. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story, which is an uncharted journey to science practice. Next slide, Liza. Thank you so much for doing that. So I grew up in a middle-class suburb of New York City, and that's me on the bottom left. And as a white kid, I had social benefits that others did not. Preschool, for example. And when I think back and preparing for this reflection, I think back about preschool, and it was the least gendered environment I think I have ever been in. It was progressive, it's supportive, a magical place. You're told you can be anything, you can do anything, and then things change. Next slide. From preschool on up, I would say, gendered roles became a little bit more present for me. Girls versus boys in gym class, math challenges, and science fairs. I ran for class president twice and won twice, but I can still hear the shouts and name calling from some of the boys who wanted to see me lose. One of my male opponents actually announced to the entire lunchroom that he was going to run against me just to see me cry. But don't get me wrong, I didn't suffer as a kid. There was no war in my town, no hunger in my house. Things broke and we fixed it, or we bought something new, even better. But when it came time to apply for college, my parents told me they weren't prepared. I was the first person in my family, I realized, to apply to a four-year college. So I went to see my guidance counselor for advice with a clipboard full of ideas. He barely listened to me and then handed me a pamphlet to attend a local college. I checked it out, but it wasn't on my list. And soon I started to see other kids, girls, walking around the hallway with that same pamphlet. My first scientific study. I marked off who had the pamphlets and who did not. I mapped out where I found the pamphlets, often on the floor of the girls' locker room. And whenever I had a chance, I'd hang outside the guidance counselor's office and ask the kids when they came out to tell me about the conversation. Sure enough, a pattern emerged. Boys had more choices and girls were given one choice. Infuriating. Back home, I had my own troubles. When I decided to attend college, my grandfather tried to talk me out of it. He reasoned that I probably would not finish. After all, my uncle didn't finish. He was honestly distressed and told me that I was going to waste my parents' money and embarrass my family. My grandfather, a loving man born in 1903 in southern Italy, was very upset when I told him I was going anyway. Let's see what happens, I said. I remember him shaking his head in disbelief. Next slide, please. Well, I graduated from college and went on to graduate school and eventually earned a PhD. I learned a lot from all those experiences, but even more about science and science practice from the women I met as an urban and community forester and what we used to politely refer to as underserved urban areas. Take Dolly Jefferson here in this image on the left. Dolly was the type of person holding on tight to keep her neighborhood together as it succumbed to job loss, drug addiction, housing evictions, and illegal dumping. She knew everybody. Dolly could get the mayor on the phone within 10 minutes, and the governor, it seemed, would call her back within a day. With equal ease, she'd rustle up a group of kids to help clear out a vacant lot and plant some trees. You couldn't walk past Dolly's house and her screened-in porch without her calling out and giving you something positive to do. A classic networker. Savvy in one of the most important factors for success, relationships. Next slide, please. I learned from Miss Shirley Boyd as she shared her profound knowledge of gardening, urban gardening, but more specifically, backyard plant propagation, and created vibrant green spaces through her Franklin Square community, teaching all who would take the time to work and listen. From Miss Shirley, I realized the importance of local ecological knowledge and that it might reside in places where we do not expect it to be. Next slide, please. And from Miss Ella Thompson here on the right, whose young daughter was brutally killed on her way home from school, I learned that behind many acts of stewardship and care is a profound and enduring love. Here she's walking with the late Senator Paul Sarbanes through the streets in Baltimore, showing him that there was still great potential in her community. Next slide, please. These experiences and observations were essential in informing the work that I do today as a scientist. For years now, StewMap, which is one of our signature projects, the Stewardship Mapping and Assessment Project, our team has used geospatial mapping and social networks to visualize what was often unseen, to demonstrate that these stories are subtle human effects that have physical properties and spheres of influence that can have a large and lasting effect on our landscapes. Next slide, please. Here in this social network diagram, there are hundreds of Dolly Jeffersons, Ella Thompsons, and Miss Shirleys working in this polycentric network. And now we know that they help form pivotal relational nodes that are essential for a vibrant city and a society. Next slide, please. Working as I have all these years for the US Forest Service, 20 years now, as a female scientist, as a social scientist in cities, and studying grassroots, bottom-up stewardship, well, there's been more than a few rapids along the way. Sometimes it's been exciting to navigate these waters as the river flows, and other times there's been barriers that have tired me out, and I've had to sit on the shore and rest. Next slide, please. But I continue on with my fellow travelers, like many of you on this webinar, Adrina, certainly, and Liza, and others know them, I see is on, and especially Lindsay Campbell, a fellow scientist in the Forest Service who I've worked alongside with for 20 years. We stay close, we do our best to help and affirm each other, critique each other, and draw strength from each other. In doing this, we become strong paddlers. This is essential as institutions are slow to change. Next slide, please. When I left Baltimore in 1995, on the work I was doing in those neighborhoods, I returned to New York City. I was given many gifts, friends and memories, and 2 figurines given to me by Miss Shirley and Miss Ella. Other scientists might have a DNA double helix model on their office shelf, but I keep these on my desk to remind me that there are many ways of knowing, to look for strength and capacity in unexpected places, and that people can be powerful agents and healing agents of change. Last slide, please. When I graduated Yale University in 1993, I went to visit my grandfather in Florida. We sat on his porch watching golfers drive around the golf course, and he told me that he was wrong and that I had taught him something, that women could do these things now. I nodded and whispered, "Grandpa, we always could." But still, it meant a lot to me that he said that. He was 90 years old then and still learning. And I'm 53, and so am I. Thank you.
Erica, thank you so much for sharing that story. What a wonderful journey, and one about, debunking myths and being a pioneer, but also to acknowledge all those that have influenced you along the way that may not necessarily be in academia, in research. They're just as powerful in terms of influencers in your life. So thank you for that. We'll hear more from Erica later on in our discussion, but I do want to turn this over to a good friend, Maria Arroyave from Colombia. And Maria is also one of our very first alumni, or alumnus rather, of the International Seminar on Urban Forestry and Community Engagement, and that was held in 2017. And I've come to know Maria. We've traveled together to Italy to the World Forum on Urban Forest, and we've also worked together. I've been kept abreast of the work that she's doing on iTree and StuMap in Colombia. So I'm going to turn this over now to Maria. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa and Adrina, for inviting me to this event. And thank you all for attending. Okay, my name is Maria Arroyave. I am a forest engineering with a Master of Science in Ecosystems. And I work as a professor and a researcher at the University EIA, that means Antioquia School of Engineering in Medellin, Colombia. This is a picture of my city. And next, please. And how did I come with the urban forestry? My background is in forestry, as I told you, but I worked as a professor in the environmental engineering program at the university. So students are more interested in water pollution, air pollution, improving environmental quality, and they were not so interested in forests. Actually, when I asked them to learn the scientific names of the trees, they were complaining that they didn't want to pronounce those Latin names, that they wanted to measure the trees and everything. So I was kind of disappointed, because my students, they really don't like plants. That's weird to me. But fortunately, there were some students who really like, some few students who really like biology. So I got them into this wonderful world of the trees. And with them, with the students, I started working in projects about sustainable growth of cities, improving the environmental quality, the mitigation and adaptation to environmental change. That means the climate change, the air and water pollution, protection of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So when they saw that there is a link between the trees and the environmental quality, they started to pay more attention to what I was proposing. So it was very exciting for me to count with those students, because I got them into their graduate works, their thesis, so I could make some good advances on that. Next slide, please. First, we started looking at some phenomenon that we were living in Medellin, that the trees were dying, they were having dieback. So we started researching about what the causes were, about why are they dying. And amazingly, they were dying for some physical properties of the soils, because they were stressed, because they were not being planted in the right place, and there were no insects or bacteria or fungi that were attacking them. That was just because they were not planted in the good space. And also what we saw was that these trees that are not healthy, they are not going to give the ecosystem services And so that's why we tried very hard to establish some strategies to improve their health. So definitely, this is a topic that I am very interested in, and that we have contributed through our research. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. And then I came up with this beautiful topic, the urban forest ecosystem services. I mean, just to read that words, I mean, that makes me cry, really. It's like, I love that topic. Because the trees are very important for us in the cities. They remove the pollutants, the air pollutants, they storage and capture carbon that are greenhouses that contribute to the climate change. They regulate the microclimate. I mean, as you may know, if you walk through a street without trees, is very different if the street has trees. I mean, you will be more comfortable. And also the landscape improvement, the biodiversity and wildlife protection, the soil conservation, the hydric regulation, all those ecosystem services that improve the environmental quality of cities and, of course, the well-being of human population. Actually, my two daughters are medical. I mean, they studied medicine. And I told them that trees are very important for the physical health and for the mental health. And they are kind of, how can they do that? And just I showed them the data, the results, and now they look at the trees differently. So as my students also. With this topic, I came with, I mean, I just found in the scientific literature to the work of David Nowak, which by far is my inspiration. I mean, I really want to do everything he does with the urban forests in the United States. I would like to do that in Colombia. So I contact David Nowak and I invited him to Medellin. And so we work in the i3 software and we did a very good development. Next, please. Next slide, please. So we work in the adaptation of i3 Eco to Colombia. So we had to look for the location, climate data, air pollution, all the 3 species that we have in the tropics that are not in the United States. We added like 1,000 species to the database of i3, so we can run the program and to get the results in very short times of periods of time. So that was, I mean, it was a success. Actually, many people from different cities in Colombia asked me for my advice to how to run the i3 Eco. Next slide, please. So this is the methodology. So first we study what do we have, what is the forest structure, measuring trees, diameters, heights, everything, if they are dying or not. And then we estimate the ecosystem services, why are urban trees important? And finally, we give a monetary value and strategies for urban forests management. So it is a complete methodology that goes from the forest structure to the management. So that is my work. And next slide, please. So this is only to show you the results, the health status of urban trees in Medellin. Next slide, please. All the urban forests that we, services that we got from the running the program. Next slide, please. how the urban forests contribute to pollutant removal, so we can show people who make decisions how important it is to protect the urban trees in the cities. Actually, we gave them monetary values also. Next, please. Some publications that we have from our work. I had the opportunity, as Liza was saying, to be in the World Forum of Urban Forests in Mantua, also in the forum, Latin American Forum in Bogota. And I am the co-author of some chapters of books, all related to tree health and ecosystem services. Next, please. We have a map of the ecosystem services of each tree in a comuna. We hope we can do that in the whole city, but with the Urban Forest Service, with Camille McCarthy, we work in a project about in a comuna 10, working in the ecosystem services of each tree. So we have that map in which we see that the carbon storage, air pollutant removal of each tree. So people can look at and see all the services that those trees are giving to us for our physical health and also mental health. Next, please. We also work with the STEW map with Michelle Johnson. We made a network of social groups, working for the environment, because it is very important to engage people in the urban forestry. If you don't work with people, you are not as successful as you may think. Next, please. We did some phenology monitoring in 15 species. That is very exciting work too, because you go and see the trees, if they are flowering, if they have their leaves or fruits and everything. That is very important. Next slide, please. And we had one online catalog of flora in the Abura Valley, which is very helpful for architects, for managers, for citizens to look at the species that they have around. So they get to know the name of the species and why they are important. Next, please. We also have the online catalog of urban trees in Colombia with the US Forest Services International Program too. Next, please. And finally, these are some projects that I would like to pursue in the future. I would love to implement a citizen science program for tree monitoring, to get to know the growth of native species, the pests and diseases in urban trees, their tolerance to urban conditions, the environmental conditions. And I also think that it is very important, the application of smart technologies in urban forestry. So next. So this is my team. I don't have pictures of them, sorry. Next. And I also want to say thanks to Camille McCarthy, Michelle Johnson, David Nowak, Conciencias, and my university for making possible this research. So thank you, all of you, for attending my presentation.
Thank you, Maria. That was really wonderful. And I just want to say, like, for international programs, Colombia, with Maria's work, was one of our first, if not one, but the first country where we started iTree work internationally. And from there, we now are in Mexico, trying to integrate it in Delhi, started work in Ukraine, and hopefully, and also in in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. And Maria is one of our consultants for the ITRI International Academy and also for building out ITRI. She has a wealth of knowledge, but I think she really summed it up nicely that if you don't work with the people, then the work doesn't really matter. Or you get more out of it when you work with people. So thank you, Maria, and we really appreciate this, and we'll hear more from her and her work later on during the discussion. Till then, let's turn this over to Dr. Nguyen Han Quinn from Hanoi, Vietnam. She is with Surveyor Mekong. And Quinn, when she was telling us about the work that she does with NASA and on the Delta, I mean, talk about, not just the 30,000 world view, top-down view with the help of NASA, but really the work that she does is quite spectacular, and I'm going to let her share that with you. Quinn, please, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Lisa and Adria and everyone for allowing me to join with you on this excited event. It's really great to be able to share my story, and I really like this group where women choose to walk. Yeah, so I am Quyên and I am a Vietnamese based in Hanoi, and I was graduated as a geographer in Vietnam. So talking about my career journey, I think, I was like a little girl in a family of my father is a geologist and mother is a doctor in medicine. So when I grow up, I think in my head, I always think like, oh, I want to be a doctor in medicine and want to go through the University of Medicine in Vietnam. And then my father is a geologist. So when I was a kid, my like kind of extra job in the summer was like using either color pencil or with the color water to color the map of geology for my father. And since then, I realized that, wow, working with a map is quite fun. It's coloring, the map and giving the information. And also, we have to keep the color very precise as it's request on the geological map. Yeah, so somehow I think around that childhood time, that gave me some love to the mapping. And so when I start to go to the university, that I go for two choices. One is to the University of Medicine, and the other I also registered to the Faculty of Geography of Vietnam National University. I think maybe that was the selection by the destiny. So I failed with the University of Medicine, and I enrolled in the Faculty of Geography. So when start to studying, and then I realized that geography is really like such a beautiful science, where we learn every part. We learn the structure of our earth and the whole like holistic system of the nature around us. We learn the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, and we learn all of that interaction between the earth, the biology, and also the cycle, all the cycle around us, and how the interaction of the people with the nature and what is the consequence we have. Yeah, so from that, I really love what I have learned. And also I still keep following the specialized in cartography as I think it's still like so much of fun for me when I was a kid. That is like kind of additional reason, but I think I was in the university around like the year of 94, 95. And that is a blooming era of all the internet, all the digital world. Yeah, a lot of information. And internet start to have in Vietnam. In my university, we start to learn about remote sensing, satellite image, and getting to know all of those like kind of amazing information, how it can be applied to solve our current situation. Actually, I think it's also at the time that Vietnam start to change from a very poor country before 90, and also around 90. After 90, it's a time like kind of very rapid development in Vietnam. So a lot of problem with the environmental issues, a lot of forest deforestation, also issues with the disaster. So through the studying, and then we see how all of those technologies and information can help us to solve the issues that we have around us. So it's really like kind of inspiring me to learn more on GIS and remote sensing. And yeah, it's part of cartography things is a part of it. So that's how I pursued to the directions of applying technologies, applying GIS, the Geographic Information System, and the remote sensing into solving the issues like environmental problem or supporting decision maker in Vietnam. Yeah. From, I think I first start as a researcher, and somehow we see that our just research product, sometimes it's also kind of difficult to bring it to the reality. So I also see the other factor that we really need to be able to bring our research to be at the position that the research can be applied and can bring it to the decision maker. And I go further to pursue my PhD on environmental management as well. And so at that time in Vietnam, we also start to have like kind of open of the policy and legislation on environmental monitoring, environmental management, like environmental impact assessment and also strategic environmental assessment applied to the planning and also project implementing in Vietnam. So I see that it is a really good way of using our knowledge, our capability to use the technologies on analysis information and can bring it to help improving the decision making. Yeah, that's the reason why I continuing pursued my PhD on application of remote sensing and GIS on the strategic environmental assessment. And I think I was very lucky that I was able to do the research in Hạ Long Bay. It's the area of the World Heritage in Vietnam. I think like the city where a lot of potential for development. And so bringing kind of like study and how to balancing between the environmental protection nature protection and also helping for development in the city. Yeah, so I found that the study is really useful, and I can also apply like kind of holistic approach in the with all the geography knowledge and applied it. So I found like myself was really kind of happy and fulfillment that I can be able to use my capability on that kind of work, and somehow contribute for the planning in the region, and supporting for one of the project that is the Japanese projects that they try to improving the master plan of the city. So it's really like kind of a big achievement through the PhD study for me at that time. Although I think along the way, that PhD study was also, I think it was like kind of a hard time, as like a lot of sweats and tears and scratching the head to see how can we do this, how can we solve that. But I think it's a time for kind of like, I think it's a really good training. It's really good times for, yeah, for a researcher or for a doctoral degree, doctoral student. Yeah, to learn and to overcome all the challenge. Yeah, to be able to receive the result. So after the PhD, I was able to join also in some of the consultant work and also some different projects, which is like also still applied of the technologies into forest protection or land use planning, and working with different projects, meeting different people. It's always inspiring, specifically working with the people from, development agencies like UN, people from the UN, people from USAID, are always like receiving your enthusiastic and energy on how to make impact through the projects, and make impact and how to help people in the local or in the country where you work with. Yeah, so those kind of energy is really inspiring me. And so follow that way. I was also lucky to be part of the Soviet Mekong program where I am working right now. This is also like kind of a huge inspiration from the colleague from the program. It is a joint initiative between the USAID and the NASA, where USAID bring in the development context, and NASA bring in the technical support on all the space technologies and all the knowledge from other experts in NASA, which help to the local country, to the country in the Mekong region. So for Soviet Mekong, we work in the Mekong region, include Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar. And in this program, again, I am very much inspired with the technologies, with the science inside of it, and also how we build those tools, the decision support tool that using the Earth observation technology and helping people in different countries. So for example, in our program, we're working on forest monitoring for the whole Mekong region. And also, I was also happy to be able to work with USFS team or Simba Carbon program to support Cambodia and Vietnam on different forest monitoring, or we build the tool to monitor the drought, which is to tackle the issues like with the climate change, or sometimes with the El Nino issues that some of the area is very dry. So we're helping kind of like forecast, like long-term forecast, to see how serious it is about the drought in that area, and work with the local government in order to help the local, like the farmer, to plan their crop planting in advance. So for example, like in Vietnam, in Ninh Thuận province, for example, it's a very dry area, and we're supporting them to see if the drought in this year, it could be serious. So maybe they can change from cultivation of rice into other crop like beans or something which needs less water. So in order to help them to improve their livelihood. Or also we work on the flood monitoring, that we have the program with the World Food Program in Cambodia. So we contribute for them the near real time flood mapping in Cambodia, and they can integrate those information with the other model to estimate or to do the assessment of the vulnerability on the flood to some specific area. So they would see where the people, or where would be the area that people need more support. Yeah, so all of those experience working on different way of applying space technologies, and also our program also promoting the open data from the NASA, open Earth observation data. We build the ready-made tools, and we transfer those kind of tools to the user in different countries, and also we transfer those tools to government in different countries for them to use. We found that I found that it's really like a huge support to the government, and also to the people in the region. Yeah. Talking about the journey, I think it's it may be not always like yeah, I mean, to have to be able to achieve the success, I think, or to gain the achievement, there are always like struggling or difficulties on the way. And so for example, like earlier when I start into the study, the technology at that time maybe not as fast as development as now. So we see that technology change every day. I love technology and it's inspiring me, but also I have like kind of my capability maybe not always can move to the new technology. And nowadays, yeah, we hear a lot on machine learning, on the AI. So that struggling can also, that difficulties also happen. And to be able to realize the ability to work on it, or to also I can see I shift my able to support to people, yeah, to other in the team would also be important. So yeah, maybe not always that I can use my ability in using technology, but also like experience working with the local partners, connecting with the people is also the way to support the whole team to move and to achieve the success. So I think at the end, I think for me, the journey on the career path, yeah, it's really like a journey that I also learn about myself, about the strengths, about the weakness, about what I enjoy, about what I like, and yeah, to be able to achieve things. Thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Quinn, and just so much richness in that narrative there. For one, cartography and geography. It's such a romantic notion, for me at least, of drawing maps and being an explorer. And you've taken this and become this cartographer now, this geographer. And it really speaks to, just like maps, the layering of events, the layering of the landscape, both from top down and then bottom up, and also historically and culturally, the time in your life when you were thinking about where you were at your crossroads, where Vietnam was, where um, in terms of natural resource management, where was it at that time? It all came together so nicely. And the idea of just persevering through your research and then your PhD, it's one that should be emulated by a lot of students out there. So I really appreciate it, and really appreciate the work that Servier Mekong is doing in terms of the top-down approach and then the grassroots approach. I think that is key to successful development projects. So thank you for that, Quinn. And we'll hear more from Quinn during the discussion. And I do want to turn it over now to Patricia. Patricia hails from Peru, but is based in Oregon with Oregon State University. And Patricia and I had the chance to talk a couple of weeks ago, and found in her, in that short moment, a really amazing kindred spirit, and in terms of her vitality, in terms of her passion, etc. So let me welcome Patricia. Patty, please.
Yes. Hi everyone. First of all, I want to thank Liza and Adrina for creating this amazing space where we can all share our experiences. So I'm very honored, and thank you again for that. I have a presentation, and I want to apologize. I got carried away. It has a lot of pictures of me, so it's mostly a photo album almost. But what I want to tell you is I am from Peru. I am a forester, I'm a scientist, and I am a wood turner. And these are the things I do. And of course, I am a daughter, a sister, and a wife. Well, I have worked as a forester, focused on forest management for conservation for around 15 years in Peru. And I am a wood scientist, and I study all the physical, chemical, and biological properties of wood. I have a field of specialization that is biodegradation and wood anatomy. But I want to tell you from the start that in the world of science, I am what you would call a late bloomer. Next, please. Oh, I will explain my research along this presentation, but just these are some of the papers I have been publishing. Next, please. And I just want to tell you that part of being a scientist is to always publish your work. There is a saying, if you don't publish, you don't exist. So I found out that writing is like one of the most, is one of the major activities of being doing research. And I have many more in the oven waiting to be published. Next, please. But before this, I wanted to tell you that I won't tell you too much about my research, and what I will do mostly is tell you about the journey that led to me in this life to be a researcher. And I have to start this journey with my family and the encouragement I received from them since the beginning. These are my parents, Amada and Ramon. My mother is a sociologist and my father is an agronomy engineer. My dad my dad works on organic farming and teaching how to do organic farming. So he has a unique approach to nature. Since I was a very little girl, he would like teach me how to listen to the trees, listen to the river, and have, we lived in a farm, and to have like this connection to nature that was so unique. Also, and you will find that my education was a little bit sui generis. My father will forbid completely, some of you may not agree, he forbid completely with my mom fairy tales with princesses like Cinderella or Snow White. My grandma taught me those ones, but he would like encourage other books like the ones that you see in that picture, books about adventure, books about, I don't know, magic stories, but I don't know, I never had like that image that girls need to be saved. My mom, on the other hand, even though she's a sociologist, she's the one who encouraged me learning math since I learned to read and write. And she would buy me chemical labs for toys, and she would buy me Legos. And I realized with time that this is not your usual experience as a kid. And everything that my parents did, and also my grandparents did, was to lead me towards a STEM field. And high school solidified my interest in these fields, and especially in ecology and nature. And I have to mention that while my parents and my grandparents were doing all of this during most of the 80s and through all of the 80s and part of the 90s, my country, Peru, was going through the most horrendous war. We were in the middle of a cruel armed conflict. And sadly, the epicenter of that was my dad's town, Ayacucho. And where they lived, my mom was a professor, my father worked with the government. So they work a lot with human rights. So they sent me to Lima, to the capital, to live with my grandparents. And even though we were far away, they will still do this parenting, like sending me books and notes and things to do and homework, like through letters. So this is kind of my background. However, I want to enhance next, please, that regarding being a female in research, I think I will have to start with my female role models, and they are my mom and my aunt Teresa, who I called my second mom. They are sisters. My aunt is a lawyer, while my mom is working has worked all this time for education for girls in rural areas. My aunt works as a lawyer fighting for women's rights and also for abused children. So I think that when you grow up looking up to these people, and I am very aware this is not what most girls experience, and I was aware of that when I had more friends who were even forbidden to follow a career in science. I am so grateful for having the blessing of having them in my life. So with all this support, it was no surprise that I ended studying engineering. Next, please. I studied forest science and engineering with a major in forest management at the National Agrarian University La Molina. I'm translating the name of my university in Peru. The original plan was to study agricultural science like my father, but I took a class that it's called Rural and Amazonian Anthropology, and I took that class out of curiosity. And this was a class from the Forest Science Engineering College. And I met this group of students in my classes, and they were so different. And I realized, oh my God, this is what I want to be like, super knowledgeable of how to walk in the forest. They were audacious, they were fun, they were happy. And I really wanted, I just fell in love with forestry, just there, just looking at them. So I changed majors the next term. And I became a forester. In my university, the College of Forestry is identified by the red color. That's in the top left, you will see us like that. The little arrow is me. We celebrate nature, and with the years, it became obvious to me that foresters around the world, we are very similar in the ways that we are very passionate and devoted for the things we do. And I hope many of you like notice that being a forester is actually not a job. Being a forester is a way of life. And this has been my life for over, this was my life for over 15 years. And while I was in the university studying forest science engineering, for sure, there were many challenges, even though, yes, there were more males than females when I was in college. It was very even, I would say. However, there were so many challenges. There was this silent rule that if you were a female, you could do nothing wrong because you will be failed. However, if a male did the same exact mistake, they will be forgiven and have no problems. Especially I remember there was a class where the professor was very vocal about this. Like, if you are a woman, you shouldn't be doing forest science. And if I see you crying, I will fail you on the spot. And oh my God, we went through that. We were a very strong group of females. This in the left bottom is my brigade. We spent, as part of our education, 6 months in the forest. And this was my brigade at first for logging. And we were way more efficient than the male groups. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to look down on my male colleagues. It's just that if there is like, we had to be creative and innovative in how to face these challenges. But this was one of the happiest times in my life. And I was decided to work in conservation. And next, please. So for over 15 years, I devoted my life to development and conservation. Both my parents worked with rural communities doing development projects, so I was familiar with that. and it felt like my natural environment. So I work with conservation of diverse ecosystems with a special focus on mountain areas, but especially I work in the southern Amazon of my country. I learned so much from this experience, from all these years. I will do a lot of field work, a lot of forest inventories. I will work like doing workshops with local communities in Quechua, in Aymara, and even with Eseja indigenous communities in the Amazon. And I learned about these amazing, incredible women that are in these communities, where all the wisdom about nature relies on them, and they pass it on for generations. They are the stewards of these ecosystems, and they face so many challenges because of gender stereotypes. You must understand that my country is a country that is a male-dominated society. So it's hard. The most rural and conservative is your environment, the harder it is for females to succeed. And I witnessed incredible examples of leadership and empowerment that resulted in the success of communities. Actually, when I was working with communities in the Andean zones, I was happy to know that all the microloans that are made for families, there was a rule that all the microloans should be made to only women, because with microloans, women in the rural communities make sure that there is education, that there's good nutrition, and that there is health. And because of this, the success was so obvious. The statistics showed that females really lead their communities to success. So the microloan system is based on females now. But the last 5 years of me working with forest management and conservation, I work with Inca Terra, that is the most amazing nonprofit. I learned so much, and I was exposed to so many experiences there. And when I was working there, because we manage field stations on forests for research, I came in contact with many researchers from all over the world. And I found myself, I think the best word to express it is jealous. I really wanted to do what they did. I have always been curious. I found that I have similar interests, but they had the skills and the knowledge to answer the questions that they had, and I also had. So while working with Inca Terra, I was interested in doing a survey of fungi in the area. I met Dr. Sari Robinson. The story is really long, and I will be happy to share it with you in another space. But the thing is that Dr. Robinson offered a scholarship to my sister first. And when my sister was already studying, when I invited Dr. Robinson to our field station in the Amazon, and she offered me a scholarship. And I rejected it because I was 36 years old. I was a project director, and I thought, this is not for me. I'm done. I haven't been in a classroom for so many years, over a decade. And I really didn't think I was good enough. If you are Latin American, you know how serious this is. When my mother told me, when Dr. Robinson offered me the scholarship again, my mother told me, if you don't take this chance, I will never speak to you. And she was very serious. And I had to realize that even though I was very happy in my job, I had reached a glass ceiling. I was not going to go further. And with a heavy heart, I quit my job. But I was so happy to start my path in science. And I said I am a late bloomer in science because I started my life as a scientist in 2015. It's kind of recent. And so next, please. So I started my PhD at the Wood Science and Engineering Department at Oregon State University. And I belong to the Applied Mycology Lab led by the fabulous Dr. Sari Robinson. I cannot stress enough how important it was to have such an amazing mentor and advisor to start life in science. I do not know where I would have ended if this hadn't happened. So also in grad school, I made friends with this incredible group of female researchers, wood scientists, and we had faced the same challenges together. So I always call Sari my academic mother, and all my friends, Paola, Balkis, Shah, and my real sisters are my academic sisters. Next, please. When you start in the world of science, you realize that you know nothing and that you have to learn everything. And I was guided by my advisors and mentors here. I built a family, and I realized how important it is to have diverse perspectives in forest science. My work was focused on fungal pigments. I worked studying how fungi can color wood and how that can increase the value of wood as a material. Actually, if you have ever, especially in the States, heard about spalted wood, or in Spanish, madera sumagada or madera pasmada, this is a type of wood that has been wood decayed by fungi, but has a very high value in the market for woodworkers, especially wood turners. So I studied how wood turners would perceive the complexity of biodegradation patterns. And along the way, I became a wood turner myself. And also I want to mention that the Wood Science and Engineering Department had a lot of outreach activities. And I realized that being a female and also a Latin American female in science was not common, and that many little girls and young high school students saw in myself an example. And I realized how important it is to do representation. Next, please. And I have to mention really fast my sister. She's an amazing scientist. Amazing. She has discovered things and stuff. And I always look up to her, even though she's younger than I am. And she is my inspiration every day. And she can make or break a research idea in just a few seconds. Next, please. And after graduating, I worked as a postdoc, and then I worked as a researcher, as a visiting scientist in the Wood Anatomy Research Lab, led by Dr. Alex Bidenheft. And I became what he calls a sea warrior. We are all sea warriors. This is an amazing lab. And I learned so much here, especially about the sophistication and the art of being a scientist, and how your research should be done to help others. And in this case, the main research of this lab is to fight illegal logging using artificial intelligence for Wood ID. And my research was basically and still is, to define a new classification for figure wood, and also to create a system that will allow us to identify figuring wood without cutting the tree. And I know there are many urban foresters here, so you have to know that in the United States, the main source of figure wood in the market are urban trees. And there are like specialized mills all over. And our next step with this research will be to survey all the specialized lumber mills that that mill figure wood for the market. Next, please. So I want to comment, I know we're going to talk about this at the end after this presentation, but I just wanted to tell you about the challenges of being a female forester and to being a female wood scientist. They're very small. I mean, when you talk about challenges or discrimination, you think about big things. No, no, no. They're very small. They're like microaggressions. They're very little. It's like there's a documentary called To Picture a Scientist. They call it like feathers. It's little feathers. They're very light. When your ideas are not considered, when your promotions are difficult, motherhood is always mentioned there. When people do not believe you are a scientist or even that you are in STEM. And the worst of all, the one I really, really, really hate is mansplaining, because it's a very humiliating experience when it happens to you. And actually, when I first met Liza, that week I had the worst mansplaining, and I was like so furious. Like for 2 weeks, I was so furious, like trying to think how to answer to that like aggression. So the only way, and we all face that every day. It's not like one day, it's like every single day. So I think that organizing ourselves, being a group of people, networking, doing this, exactly what we're doing now, sharing our experiences, being mentors to younger females that want to start their path in science, we can guide them, and also like doing a lot of activism because we have to make this visible. And finally, my last slide is trying to contribute to the part of making networks. Many students in forestry students around the world do not have necessarily, especially in developing countries like mine, do not have access to the amazing, amazing research that is done in other places, like the United States, for example. So my sister and I created this initiative that is called Community. And what we are doing basically is showing students from our country. It started with our country about the research done by other researchers. And we found out two things. One, that it was not only my country. We ended with people from all over the world watching our seminars. And the second is that there was a special place that was very important where female forest science students felt so encouraged when they saw incredible forest scientists like climbing trees, doing soil samples, like going to the furthest areas, and realized, hey, I can do that as well. So I think like exposing students to all these experiences is very important. And we want to build a strong, long-lasting networks. Sorry for speeding up at the very end. And so this is the end of my presentation, and thank you so much. And the next slide has my contact data if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for your heartfelt presentation. I love the photos of your family and that your father would tell you to listen to the trees and also restrict all the princess fanfare. When I was little, that resonated with me because when I was little, my mom used to change all the endings of fairy tales so that the princess would go to school, get a job, and then build her own castle for herself and all her friends. I appreciate your reflections on your role models and your mentors and how they inspired you, and also your comment about that being a forester is not a job, it's a way of life. And I think a lot of people that work in the environmental field certainly feel that way, especially our panelists here today. So on behalf of Liza and myself, I want to thank you and thank all our panelists for sharing your stories, your research interests, and your motivations for pursuing your career paths. As a recap, and I know we don't have a lot of time left for discussion, but we do have about 10, 12 minutes, and we'd like to open it up for questions. So we do have the questions on the slide here. to generate some discussion. We're not going to go through each individual one, but we'd like to open it up to the participants that are on the line here today as well. Also to you, all our panelists, if there's a question that's burning that you want to address and that you're happy to address, then we can start there as well. I'm going to turn it over to Liza for 1 second, who's going to go through our word cloud that's been being built during the last hour and a half.
Yes, thank you. And I hope that this word cloud also inspires our discussion today and hopefully online after this session is over. But continue to fill in what you've thought about, some words as you've heard the journeys of our invited guests. And let this word cloud keep growing. And we invite you to keep adding to it and then to add to this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Liza. I just put the link in again for everyone who was new that signed up that didn't have a chance yet. The link is now in the chat to contribute to the word cloud. So I guess from there, I'm just going to open it up. Do we have any questions for any of our guests or any comments from the audience? You're welcome to put questions, comments in the chat, or just raise your hand, or just unmute yourself and start speaking. Liza, can we put up the questions just one more time? Thank you. So why don't we sort of tackle, in the interest of time, I know some of you talked about sort of the future of our field and or affiliate fields, I suppose I should say. So what advice would you give? And I think this is sort of the safest question perhaps in the time that we have. What is some advice that you would give to younger women pursuing academic careers or careers in research?
Well, I'll chime in if that's all right. I turned my camera on. Wow, I'm just struck by how amazing each person's story has been. So thanks. One thing that I just think about, and Patricia was talking about it quite clearly with her brigade from forestry school and the cohort of people that she surrounds herself with. I think that's really important. I mean, there's all different types of future research and all paths that one could take, but we often spend so much time thinking about what is my research question, what is my job, how, who's it going to help, how's it going to help? But really, when you assemble that research team, carefully curate that as well, and surround yourself with strong people of all types that will support you, that will have a give and take relationship that isn't hierarchical. I think, creating a good team really, and being cognizant of that you deserve to have a good team in which to do your job and to answer your questions and to succeed is really important.
Thank you, Erica. Patricia.
Yes, regarding that question, I think that because of the, I will call it the scientist stereotypes, remember when I talked with Liza the first time, is like when I asked you, like, think right now of a scientist, think of a scientist right now. And the first image that will come to your mind, maybe it's Albert Einstein instead of Marie Curie. So because of that stereotype of who is supposed to be a scientist, many females don't feel encouraged enough to pursue this path that is so fascinating, challenging, yes, of course, but fascinating and gives you so many happiness, and you can do things for others. So what I will do is I will advise younger women that the only way to break the stereotype is if you start your path in the field of science, especially in forestry science. That is a beautiful path, and that always have a mentor. I really don't know how my life will be without having the mentors I had, and it was really important. So mentorship and having the courage is always difficult to be the first, but have the courage to just pursue this. We need you. Like, we cannot afford to lose scientists at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Any comments, any suggestions from our participants online? We really want to hear from you as well, what your thoughts are. Doesn't have to be a response to that question, but it could be, or any of the questions.
Well, I wanted to ask all of our guests today, as well as our participants, to think about your own organizations and your own community, and where do you see the future of your organization and or your community with respect to women in research? How can we build these networks better? How can we really be deliberate in being inclusive and being empowering? Just, thoughts, please share them on the chat or out loud. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, I mean, I'll just jump in. And I see there's also a question in the chat about how to motivate girls to pursue careers in forest science. And it just makes me think that, that is a strategy to find ways to engage and to know what might be the barriers for young women to join forestry and forestry related fields, but also thinking about the field itself. So the institution itself, how can that change? And how can we broaden kind of the definition or the scope or the meaning of what we do? Because, it's been a long time since some of these institutions have been in place. And having that kind of reflection at the top is really healthy, really healthy. And in redefining and revisiting and thinking about those institutions that were created, at a certain moment in time. We heard from the panelists, timing is everything in some ways, about where your country is, where your community is, where your parents are, and so too with institutions. And so if they don't change and evolve, we can't change and evolve. So there's a little bit of flipping it too.
I would like to address Florencia's question about how to motivate girls to pursue careers in forestry science. And this particular case, I will talk from experience. My parents, my father would introduce me to nature. I mean, you need to love nature to be in that path. So if you want your kids to be in that path, so exposure to nature is fundamental. And it's a STEM field. So, there must be also some affinity with liking this type of thing. So I told you, like, my parents will like make me do math since I was like 4 years old. They had a plan. And I don't think nothing wrong with having a plan if you want someone to be in that in that path. And regarding the question about how we can change our institutions, oh boy, it's a lot of work. My institution, I am the managing director of the Wood-Based Composite Center, and 15% of us are females. So that's a lot of work. I'm new in this position. I started in November. And the first thing we are doing with the directors is designing a recruiting program for students, because we need it to be 50-50. So that's a hands-on work. And I think it's work. Like, you have to make the decision and start working on recruiting programs and how you're going to promote, like having more females, like approaching wood science in our case. Females, wood scientists are like 20%. It's really low. So we need more of that, like active plans that are done with activities and indicators to achieve that goal. That's all.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you for the question. And I guess from my perspective, the challenge with well, just to address it directly, I think part of the motivation is knowing what the options are, and I think that's been a challenge, certainly here when I think of Canada and the school systems in the various provinces. I think young women who if they don't know the options that are available to them, then they don't necessarily then they don't know. Well, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you're aware of the options and you think, hey, this is an interesting career path, then you're more likely to pursue it. And then from there, you would everything from career fairs to going and speaking to students in schools, or just being open. I think one of the things that I had told my students over the years is go and speak to someone. If there's a career path that you think is interesting, ask them for an informational interview. I mean, you're not asking them for a job, you're asking them just to speak. And if someone, I always say this, if someone can't give you 15 minutes of their time, then you don't really have anything to learn from that person anyway. So I think it's knowing what the options are, and securing, much like curating a really good research team, it's creating and curating a network of people around you that feel that you feel can support you through your career. And it can be one mentor, it can be several, and they can be men or women. So I think that's what I would suggest. We had developed through Fleming College, had produced a film called Women Branching Out, as I mentioned earlier in my intro, and I'll share the link in the chat. And it was for this reason. It was to showcase the various careers available to women in urban forestry, and then showcase some of the inspiring women who are pursuing those career paths.
Thank you, Adrina. I see that Kabiru, you've raised your hands. Please, let's entertain just a couple more, and then we'll close out. Kabiru, you're welcome.
Thank you, Ma. I just want to add to what the presenters have just said, more especially in trying to help women in research cycle so that they can overcome their peers. I think it is good for the senior women within the core or an organization to encourage women to come in and mentor them in. And that will at least reduce the level of fear in that organization. From all these presentations that I have listened to today, I am sure it's a very good and it's something that is inspiring for women especially. So I hope this your network can be expanded to encourage women in other global cycle, so that they will be listening and watching this. It's very interesting. You see women in the forest service doing all these things they have been doing, which with all the forbearance and the other issues involved, because they are surrounded with issues, a lot of issues, So women should have courage in whatever they're doing. They should have courage. It is a learning situation, and I'm sure if you put yourself in, you will definitely learn. Thank you for giving the opportunity to speak today. Lisa?
Thank you, Kabiru, and thank you for your support. And it's always nice to see you at these discussion forums. Just to round out, just one question that I invite our invited guests to really quickly touch upon. And this is from Niha. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, but she is curious if it's possible to be a woman in urban ecological research without doing cultural or advocacy in the field. So let's just do this really quick question or speed answer here. Let's start with Erica.
Oh, I'm just wondering if that's a trick question, because I of course I would say, no, it's not possible, but there are many paths to knowing and these days. So I don't want to say no completely, but it sure does help.
Wonderful. Maria.
I would think that you can do it, but it will be more successful if you do that cultural work. Definitely.
Wonderful. Quinn.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, for me, I am not like kind of advocacy by myself, but I think, yeah, I like to join in the cultural and also social work, like volunteering. So maybe yes.
Perfect.
But by the favorite person. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia?
Well, definitely yes, you can do it, but the management of natural resources is a human endeavor. So you need to communicate with the community, because the community is the one using the natural resources. So no need for advocacy maybe, but yes, constant communication and networking with the community.
Perfect. Adrina, and then I'll pass it on to you.
I'm with Erica. I think it's hard to do any kind of urban related research without looking at cultures and backgrounds, and I mean, just it is a human endeavor, as Patricia just said too. So I think if you're just focused on kind of metrics and looking at let's say tree physiology or the applied sense and mapping, then sure. So in the end, I think it depends on what kind of ecological research you want to do, but certainly if you're working with and in communities, it would be very challenging to avoid human elements and human contacts. I had in my work in the past, I had arborists say to me, "Oh, you know, I got into arboriculture because I wanted to work with trees." And most of the time, they're talking to people. So it's just, I think it depends on what you want to pursue and how you look at it. But it certainly would be a more holistic approach to endeavor to look at the various cultures in urban areas. So I think I'm gonna close. Liza, do you have any closing comments? Okay, so listen, thank you all so much for your time, for our participants for signing in. You know, our conversation touched on the various types of research. We looked at stewardship and engagement, mapping ecosystem services, narratives. We looked at kind of various applications of research to local communities, talked about curating teams. I mean, we were kind of all over. I wish we had more time for a broader discussion. But we are very grateful for your time, for your insights, and for broadening our perspectives in urban research initiatives, and also the variety of motivators that drive you. It's very inspiring. So to close, Liza and I will be breaking for July and August. We'll be doing something fun on our YouTube channel, so please stay tuned for that. We will share what that is, but our next session will be in September. We don't have an exact date yet, but we'll be sending out an email, and the topic will be women-led conservation organizations. So thank you all very much again, and please continue the conversations online. We do have a number of platforms. We have 2 Facebook groups, Women in Urban Natural Resources, and we also have one for moms in urban natural resources. We have a shared Google Drive for resources. We're going to put a number of publications from our panelists today that they've shared with us, and a page of links as well as a page of bios. And that's the link to our shared Google Drive there as well. And it's at the bottom of every email that's sent